this video I'm going to cover my house rules for close assault tactics. Firstly, I just want to go over an explanation of a bit of an ORBAT and the reason why I've gone down the path I have with these rules very briefly, which I did touch on in the indirect fire portion of my house rules. So here laid out I have an example of an on-paper organisation for a German battalion and a Russian regiment. So as I mentioned in my indirect fire rules, the intent was to make mortars and infantry more effective, and the reason I attached the attributes of spotting to the infantry is simply because mortars are organic to the infantry, they're attached to the infantry. They have nothing to do with tanks, except when they're with panzer units, but even then they're under the organisation at company, platoon, regimental level and so on of the panzer grenadiers or infantry that are in that overarching tank unit like a panzer division. So, and again, these are on paper. In reality, they're a lot different, and I've also not included transport. So this is a classic organisation of a German infantry battalion. So remember, the German counters represent a platoon. So here we have 4 companies. So the first 3 companies were your infantry companies, each comprising of 3 platoons, make up a company. The 4th company was a, depends on what name you want to use, support company, weapons company, machine gun company. And I'll touch on why I've got SMG counters here in a second, but basically you had a platoon of mortars, 3 platoons of medium machine guns. So that made up the battalion. Each regiment usually had 3 battalions, so just replicated here. But I've also included here, okay, at regimental level, basically the German organisation was quite consistent in its groupings of 4s. So a platoon would have 3 sections and a bit of support section. A company would have 3 platoons and a bit of support platoon. A battalion would have 3 companies and then a bit of a support company. The same as the regiment would have 3 battalions and then a bit of a support unit here. So here we have the gun company, so 2 platoons of 75mm field guns and a platoon of 150mm field guns and an anti-tank platoon. So it depends on what era and the actual fit out. They'd be either 37mm, 50mm or 75mm anti-tank guns. And they also had a platoon of engineers or assault pioneers, which really come in handy with the CAT rules. Okay, moving over to the Russian ORBAT. As we know, each counter in the Russian organisation is a company. So that is 1 of these rifle companies is equal to 3 of the German platoons. So I'm missing a machine gun up here, so I'm going to explain all that with the machine gun shortly. I believe there was only 2 counters supplied, unless I'm missing one or I can't find it. I'll just double check that. Russian, yep, 2 counters supplied of that 4.7mm heavy machine gun. Okay, so each battalion, so now with 3 companies, this is battalion, had 3 companies of infantry, a platoon of mortars, and a platoon of medium machine guns. They're replicated here by the heavy machine gun counter. So as you can see, very similar to the German battalion. So this column is the same as all of this. And you had 3 battalions in the regiment. And then again, very similar to the Germans, over here you've got a company of guns, so field guns, the 75mm field gun, a company of, actually, is that correct? Because each of those equals a company. Anti-tank company, 2 platoons, 3. So really, if this also replicates a company, would that just be sort of 1? Guess it kind of would be. Yeah, we'll go with that. I don't know. How do I feel about that? Yeah, I think they're about equal to the Germans, so we'll call that a platoon. You had the 120 mil at regimental level, so a platoon of the 120 mil. Also, we had a platoon, so again, this replicates a company, but that's okay, a platoon of engineers, platoon of reconnaissance troops. And as well as in the battalion, we also had a anti-tank rifle company, and the companies over here had, battalions over here had an additional anti-tank rifle platoon. So I've just added the SMG because I'm going to talk about that later. Okay, so machine guns. So medium machine guns are a counter that is represented in Panzer Leader, but not here in PanzerBlitz. So we know that the light machine gun's inherent to the platoon. So the Germans generally had 1 per section or squad. Late war, they had 2 per section or squad where available. Obviously, that was just on paper. But the medium machine guns mounted on tripods, belt-fed ammunition, were really important in World War II, still today. So I've actually represented those by these submachine gun counters. So each platoon had roughly 4 medium machine guns. So they had, again, on tripods, had extended range optics, really effective. So each hex is 250 meters. So this one has a range of 750. This has a range of 1.5 kilometers for the normal rifle platoon with LMGs. Like, that isn't very realistic. So I think they've actually factored the SMGs into here. So what I'd like to do is swap those range factors. This isn't really as solid in my rules, but it's easy to do. So this gives us 3 and 3, so 750 meters for a bipod mounted LMG over iron sights. That's pretty much the effective range, is quite accurate. Medium machine gun out to 1500 meters, can do harassing fire longer, but I think that's accurate. So if I use these SMG counters as my medium machine gun counters, that works really well, taking into account the range. Just for comparison, I've got the Russian submachine gun unit. Now these, I believe, were actually replicated the sort of scratch units that the Russians created pretty much during Stalingrad. So just heaps of submachine guns, heaps of grenades, sort of assault troops. And then they gave the Germans a counter. I don't know if they're supposed to be Panzer Grenadiers or whatever, but they've got the longer range. That's a bit all over the shop. So that's what I've used there. So for the Russian medium machine gun, which really should be like a 7.62 maximum or something, I've just used the heavy machine gun counter, the 12.7, same, similar effectiveness, and in fact exactly the same. So 6 and 6, 6 and 6. There you go. So that is the ORBAT. So why is that important? Well, as I said, for spotting for the 82 mil, for all the mortar types, for both sides, you can see the mortars are directly attached to the infantry, and for my close assault tactics, which we'll see shortly. Okay, now let's investigate my close assault tactic, or CAT, rules. So again, as I mentioned, the intent of these rules is to really beef up the effectiveness of infantry and all these little previously pretty useless field guns, mortars, etc., utilising the ORBAT that was used on the ground. Okay, so the overall concept of my close assault tactics is that you can add the attack factors of these infantry support weapons to your close assault attack. Okay, so that really beefs up the effectiveness of a close assault attack. Okay, Germans and Russian Guard units can use also the spotting rules so that units sort of stand off can also add their attack factors to your close assault attack. So this replicates, okay, you give a quick set of radio orders for the attack, the infantry go in, while the infantry going in, the mortars are firing HE, smoke, the 75mm field guns are firing HE, smoke at the target. The medium machine guns here, represented again, as I mentioned, by this SMG counter, putting in fire, as you can see here, at right angles, and they'll keep firing until the infantry are right on the edge of the assault, then they'll cut off. So that greatly enhances the infantry assault. So if you had none of the supporting factors, as I've just described, you can imagine that the infantry assault will be less effective, while you add all that support, much more effective. So the units that can be used to add an attack factor to a close assault are the infantry units, as I mentioned, that were in the ORBAT. So mortars, field guns, and machine guns. Okay, nothing else. So again, it really heavily represents the ORBAT of the infantry. So the same for the Russians, machine guns, the field guns, and mortars. Okay, so let's look at an example. So here we've got a company of infantry, so 3 platoons, supported by their battalion, 2 platoons of medium machine guns, so missing 1, and their mortars. So they're going to attack these infantry. Okay, they are attacking uphill, but they are adjacent, so there should be no halving of the attack. I should just check that, but I haven't changed those rules, so that would be the same. Okay, so 3 plus 3 plus 3 is 9. So again, these rifle companies historically extremely difficult to destroy. So 9 to 16 will be 1 to 2. So let's add the mortars. So 12 plus another 12 here is 24. So now we're at sort of 1 even money territory. And adding the 2 field guns, in this case only another 4, would get it to 28, would make really no difference. But you can see by adding these attack factors, it makes this infantry attack much more effective. Okay, when you do a close assault, you've actually got a couple of options. So in this case, starting adjacent, so we can spot the infantry in the woods. I could elect, if I wanted to, during the firing phase, which happens before the close assault phase, to fire just normally, as per the normal rules, at this infantry unit first. So I could add all these units, I could add the medium machine gun and the field guns, because direct fire happens before indirect fire. So that would be 6, 6, so 12 plus 4 is 16. So I could do an even money attack there first, then do the rest of my moves. And then when it comes to the close assault phase, I could do the attack with 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3 for the mortars, because it was no point doing indirect fire by themselves against that unit, be ineffective. So 12 on 16. So I could do an even money attack with the direct fire, then a close assault attack with the mortars. So what are the advantages of doing that? Well, on the combat results table, they've got these DDs. If they're already dispersed, that double D is now destroyed. So if I think it's worth it, if I look at the odds, it might be worth doing that direct fire attack first to try and get them dispersed, then do the close assault attack, so that increase the chances of destroying, we can get that DD. Or I might look at my attack factors and go, no, I'm better off lumping it all into the close assault attack. Okay, I've put this tank here just to show that because of those coordination issues that I mentioned, so that they might be from the same Panzer division, however, they're used to working closely, but not so closely that their tank can immediately support with cut off the infantry assault. However, the tank can pre-soften up the target with his attack factor in the firing phase, as I mentioned, is an option with these. So they're still supporting the attack, but not in the same direct way that the machine guns, the mortars, etc. can do, just because these are organically from the same regiment, or in the case of the infantry and the medium machine guns, the mortars, they're from the same battalion. Okay, so as I said, German units and guard units can have the supporting units offset, because they're using the radio, quick set of orders, maybe some predetermined signals. Yep, cut off on a red flare, so the mortars keep firing, the guns keep firing, the machine guns keep firing. Boom, red flare goes up, because now these guys are too close, firing stops, the assault enters the enemy position. So what about Russian just rifle units? What can they do? Can they just do nothing? Well, no. Again, as I mentioned with the indirect fire, if you're adjacent or co-located, you can use that rule. So again, you're in direct runner communication, close signaling, like visual signals communication, or maybe even field phone communication. So I've just used this same similar attack here. So these guys, you can see they're co-located. So here's a battalion of Russian infantry. So the 3 companies of rifles plus the mortars, okay, and they would have the medium machine guns as well. So what they can do here is they can, during their movement phase, go 1, leaving the mortars behind because the mortars can't move and fire. Then in the close assaults phase, so now these are adjacent to the mortars, so the mortars can be used in that close assault. So you have 5 plus 5 plus 5 is 15, plus the 3 is 18 versus 8. So that's actually got you up to the 2-to-1. Okay. Similarly, as I mentioned before, okay, you've got the option as well. So now, correction, let's just swap these out. So let's pretend now that these were guards units. So exactly the same attack, but now they're just like the Germans, okay? So now they not only can add the mortars, they can also add their machine guns, this field gun, and the 24 of the 120mm mortars. So that is now a massive attack with the -2 for close assault tactics. As soon as you get those 120mm mortars involved, it's devastating. But once again, you've also got the option. I might want to, especially with the 24mm mortars being more effective, I might want to soften up the target first to try and get that double dispersal. So I might want to do a direct attack, say 3 plus 6 is 9 on 8, so that's 1-to-1. Then I can, because I have to resolve these separately, direct fire before indirect fire, then indirect fire, so 27 to 8, 3-to-1. Okay, so you've got an even money attack, a 3-to-1 attack, so that might do the job. Then a close assault attack, so 18 to 8, 2-to-1. So now, in this case, the attack factors, as opposed to the one I mentioned with the Germans, it probably is trying that sort of 3 bites of the cherry attack, because you get a dispersal. Then in your final attack of even money, you know, you've got the opportunity on these columns to get the double dispersal, which is destroyed. So it really frees up the options. So that's with the guards units. As I said, the rifle units don't have the ability to call in standoff fire. They have to be adjacent. Or you can imagine if the rifle units sort of in defense, you know, the Germans attack, the Russians survive, don't get dispersed. In their next turn, they can close assault back. Now, because they're stacked together, yep, they can both sort of close assault. Sort of a counter attack, if you like. I'll just touch on opportunity fire, which I'm going to go on next. So this also, opportunity fire actually allows you in this same situation, if the Germans were advancing, you could have the opportunity to opportunity fire prior to the German close assault going in. So the German moves adjacent, you fire, maybe get some casualties, you know, disperse this guy maybe, and these two go in for the attack. So you've reduced, so that's much more effective, because really a close assault, both sides are going to be receiving casualties, which isn't really replicated in the game, but I guess, you know, the idea is that the following turn you get the casualties. In my case, I'll do indirect fire. Okay, so just reiterate, adding all those infantry weapons that I mentioned before can be added to the actual attack factor of a close assault. So the medium machine guns, the mortars, the field guns, machine guns, mortars, field guns for the Russians. The Russian rifle units, not equipped with radios, have to be adjacent or stacked to utilize that rule. Or the guards units treated the same as the Germans. And you do have the option, using my indirect fire rules, of direct fire first, then indirect fire, then close assault, or you can just add them all together in the close assault phase. Tanks, other units, anti-tank weapons cannot add their attack factor, but they can be involved in that pre-attack, if you like. Okay, now this is closely tied in with the indirect fire rules, but I'll just have a look at also what about moving into an attack factor. So let's quickly look at I'll just move all these guys out of the way. a German Panzer Grenadier or motorized company. Okay, so pretty much exactly the same ORBAT, except each platoon is carried in half tracks, and mortars, etc., should be carried in half tracks as well, where possible, as well as medium machine guns and so on. Okay, so you can see, correction. So in the rules in PanzerBlitz, again, this ties in my indirect rules, but you could move and unload, but then you could not do a close assault in that turn. You couldn't use your attack factor in that turn. In my rules, you can. Okay, so you move in, cannot use the road rate because that's like an administration move as per the normal rules, but you can move in and go straight into the assault. Boom. So let's say that same company moves up from a distance, goes into the assault. Okay, on top of that, the half tracks, as they're organic to the infantry, so a Panzer Grenadier platoon is a platoon of infantry with 4 half tracks, 1 for PHQ, 3 for the 3 sections. They belong to the infantry, they're organic to the infantry, they own those vehicles. So they can add their attack factor of 2 to that attack also. So effectively, a platoon of Panzer Grenadiers is now an attack of 5. Okay, so you can see that a company or battalion or Panzer Grenadiers is now extremely effective. Okay, if you are using that attack, the units cannot move afterwards. Okay, because they're involved in the attack, they're tactically laid out. The vehicles are tactically moving, so they've got to stop. So you can't have the option of dropping them off and moving away. Okay, so that is German half tracks only can do that. Russian half tracks probably later in the war, yeah, sure, but I'm just treating them as transport. And also it's important to note that German tanks can't do that, again, because of the constraints I mentioned before. However, they can obviously take the troops in, drop them off, and then they have to stop, unlike in the original rule. Same for trucks, they can still drop them off into combat, but they have to stop. But because I have opportunity fire rules, both of those options are extremely vulnerable because you can shoot the tank riders off the tank, or obviously trucks are extremely vulnerable. I also have a rule, just like the CPs, that mortars, so this can be the equivalent of the 251/10 variant, I believe, that carried mortars. So we can go full Burko with our Panzer Grenadier battalions by carrying our mortars. So you can imagine, as I said, the company battalion of Panzer Grenadier is really strong, really powerful. However, you can't move and shoot, etc. So they can stay loaded up. I've lost them. Yep, there they are. They can stay loaded up for the defensive value, but when they're firing and everything, they're just stationary as per normal mortars. They treat them exactly the same, except they've got a defense factor of 4, movement factor of 10. Okay, and I guess we can say, yep, they've also got the machine guns, I suppose. But that's key to note. Actually, you can't use the half tracks by themselves in close assault. They have to be with infantry, so they can't close assault tanks, etc. Okay, so that pretty much sums up the close assault tactics. Again, so it really increases the effectiveness of the infantry and makes some use to these field guns, etc. Also, I will mention engineers, exactly the same, increase the effectiveness, except I've said you don't have to stack. They just have to be involved in the same attack. So the assault pioneers. So that is the close assault rules. So I'll just recap. So Germans can add the attack factor of any support weapon that are organic to the infantry. So mortars, 75mm, and the machine gun units that I've made up. Russians can do the same. However, only guards can call in the fire offset from a distance. Half tracks of German variety can move in, assault, and add their attack factor to the attack, making them more effective. Russians can move in, can't use the attack factor, and no tank may use the attack factor. And as soon as you drop up into close assault, you have to stop. and that'll tie in with the opportunity fire rules. Okay, lastly, I'm going to go over my opportunity fire rules. Okay, so opportunity fire, I'm sure it was considered, you know, one of the perceived weaknesses of PanzerBlitz is the Panzer bush effect. So, yeah, everyone hiding in the bush, but it's not a bad thing because it makes you think about terrain, which is obviously one of the biggest factors with your planning and everything. Okay, but I'll just show you an example of, you know, how the PanzerBlitz rules dealt with this, I believe, and it wasn't so bad. So just using the PanzerBlitz rules, so not my rules, consider, okay, this half track with infantry is going to close assault these, or plans to close assault these, this gun. Okay, so they move up, they can't use the road move. Well, sorry, they can because you can't close assault anyway, so it doesn't really matter. But let's say they move into here and then they unload. Okay, now there's no opportunity fire, so the Russians just have to watch them do that. However, the Germans now can't close assault this turn as per the rules because they've been unloaded. They can't use their attack factor when they're unloading. So even though the infantry themselves could do move 1 and attack, okay, so and while those guys can do nothing about it, in this case, the Russians can't do anything about it. However, the Russians on their next turn can now fire first. If the Germans survive, they can then consider probably firing with the half tracks and then close assaulting at the end of their turn with the infantry. So that works okay. Okay, the weakness of the system is, yep, let's ignore these guys. These guys are going to go off somewhere else. So they just happily, you know, move past. There's nothing you can do about it. Okay, so opportunity fire in my rules is why I've allowed, or one of the reasons why I've allowed you to transport and attack in the same turn. So if you're going to opportunity fire, that is, say stop, I'm going to, crash going to be there, let's say it's here. Okay, stop, I'm going to attack you there, alright, and use your attack factor, destroy it, and then you can't do anything with your unit on your turn. That's basic opportunity fire, so most of you will be familiar with that. However, if that survives, then unload, now I can attack because I've already had the opportunity to attack. So it's pretty much the same in that regard. However, it does stop you from just moving past, you know, like I said, willy-nilly off to some other task. Okay, so of note, again, makes my Panzer Grenadiers a little bit more effective is you can't opportunity close assault, I suppose. So if I was moving in with these guys against the infantry, infantry can't fire at armoured units, so they're not able to do anything. They have to, which is sort of realistic, because they've got no effective anti-tank weapons in this case. Maybe they've got anti-tank rifles, but whatever. Okay, and when they unload, they're no longer moving, so they can't fire at them. So they sort of can't defend themselves there. Is that realistic? I don't know, but it sort of adds to the power. And again, you can imagine if they were being carried in trucks, they're going to be very vulnerable. The riflemen to be able to blast them up. Okay, so the only rule I have is they have to move at least 1, and you can only opportunity fire without the aid of a spotter. Okay, so if you know, units are moving, say, into the woods and I stop there, so I've moved 1, you've got line of sight, but you haven't got a spotter, you can't opportunity fire. If they move out in the open, you can opportunity fire. Okay, so even if there was a Russian unit here, which if you're stationary, could act as a spotter in your turn, but you can't opportunity fire. That's my only rule. Okay, any dispersals just last for the rest of that turn. So at the end of the German turn, I'll turn them back over. Okay, and yeah, obviously I'll just put a marker on the Russian unit in this case, so they can't do anything else in that turn. Mortars can't opportunity fire because, as I mentioned, they don't use direct fire, they use indirect fire. So likewise, howitzers and wesps and that can only use opportunity fire within half their range, my direct fire rules for howitzers. So that's my opportunity fire rules. A few other little rules I have is something without an attack factor can't spot. So trucks and wagons, etc. they can't spot. And sometimes I used to think that they shouldn't add to victory conditions, but really transport was really important. So yeah, I sort of scrapped that. The other thing is, so my sequence of play. So I mentioned before about different units being able to attack multiple times. So let's just set up our little, actually better make that a guards unit. Okay, so once again, you announce your attack. So the roll would be, let's say I'm going to direct fire. I can add this to the guards close assault tactics, or I can use direct fire. Same with this. So the sequence of play is all direct fire is first because that happens quickest, then indirect fire, then close assault tactics. So really, someone could use the attack 6 times in a single turn. I think I worked out a mine attack. And that's the other thing. And normal artillery actually happens, because it happens separately, happens after mortars. So you can't combine artillery and mortar attack factors. So in the case of the Germans, if you've got your howitzers that are being spotted by the CP, okay, your mortars are being spotted by the rifles, they can't coordinate to add those attack factors together. So that will happen quicker, so separately. So mortars happen separately and quicker because their mortars are easy to set up and get on target, while howitzers, so goes direct fire, indirect fire mortars, indirect fire howitzers, close assault tactics. So yeah, I think it's 6 times. You could be on a minefield, direct fired, indirect fire by mortars, indirect fire by artillery, overrun, and then close assault tactic. Obviously that's not really going to happen, but that's just my sequence of play. Okay, so that ends more or less my opportunity fire. So I haven't completely comprehensively covered my rules. If I get the chance, I'll put them up. You'll see them on the video. I have, like I said, a medium sight. Hopefully I'll put the link of that up. But in this I've covered indirect fire rules, close assault tactics, and opportunity fire, and just some minor adjustments to my rules that basically the main purpose is to marry up that infantry, make them more powerful, and get those units operating with the units they were actually attached to in real life. I may never make another video, but anyway, thanks for watching. See you next time.